course, every different country has different national laws around hate crimes, but we know that hate crimes are seen through the intent of being motivated by hatred, particularly of particular groups. But I think that we need to go further when talking about these types of crimes and name them for what they are, which is terrorism. They are designed to strike terror at the heart of communities, particularly minority groups. And we have seen that they often are motivated by people who are radicalized on the internet. We talk about terrorism in this post-9/11 world often as radical Islamist terrorism. But we see the same tactics being used where it comes to anti-Semitic attacks and where it comes to attacks against minorities, including LGBT communities. And these are not lone crimes. These are part of a system designed to strike terror into the hearts of people to stop them going about their daily lives.
And these are not isolated incidents, of course, as you point out. So, you know, what is propelling the growth of these kind of attacks?
Well, we've certainly seen the rise of populism and nationalism over the last decade, and this rise of hatred of anyone who is perceived as being different. And that has come with a pushback on progressiveness and on human rights around the world. But this is also tied in countries like America with free access to guns and without enough security and scrutiny of how those guns are being sold and used. This is also occurring in countries like Hungary and Poland, where there are attacks on equal rights for LGBT people, where there are attacks on access to healthcare and non-discrimination at work. So we have to look at this within political contexts, as well as within the radicalization of individuals on the internet or in person, to try to encourage them to hate and then commit crimes against these populations.
And, you know, that you seem to feel has been worsened with people like Donald Trump taking advantage of this deep division in countries like America.
I mean, President Trump didn't just take advantage of it, he actually rose to power because of it, by feeding it. And we can see that the LGBT community in the United States of America, as with women, have been fighting since he was elected to keep their rights, fighting against the pushback on healthcare, on housing, on non-discrimination generally. But what people like Donald Trump or Viktor Orban do is legitimize those people who have hatred towards these communities. They don't just legitimize them, they encourage them to go out and commit crimes. They give them tacit approval. They create an environment in which, instead of protecting human rights, the state is almost encouraging people to go out and violate those rights.
How difficult is it to convict someone of a hate crime like this?
Again, it depends, it varies from country to country, but what you need to have is clear evidence that the crime was motivated by more than just wanting to commit a crime, but was motivated against a specific population or group of people. And I think it's fairly clear, even without seeing written evidence, without seeing evidence from this person's computer or letters or WhatsApp messages, it's pretty clear that someone that goes into and targets a club that serves a specific community is motivated by hatred for that community and for the allies of that community who were in the club. And we know that the man who eventually tackled the shooter was not a member of the LGBT community. He was a former police officer who calls himself an ally, someone who's simply there to have a good time. And it's not just hatred of the LGBT community that is coming out, it's also hatred of anyone who supports them and supports them living their lives and having fundamental rights like everyone ought to be able to have.
I'm interested too, you know, there's been so much discussed around the World Cup, which has just started in Qatar, and the LGBTQ grievances that many in the community have. You know, what does it say globally when a country like Qatar is allowed to host such a significant event?
Qatar, from the moment that it received the World Cup, has been systematically violating human rights of those people who have been creating the stadiums, putting people into state-condoned slavery. And there have been grave concerns about Qatar's own human rights abuses. But the way that it has treated LGBT plus fans and the idea that people can wear rainbow flags or rainbow buckets for the fans of the Wales national team, the crackdown on fundamental rights for people coming in to visit for the World Cup shows just how clear it is that Qatar should not have been given this World Cup. Anyone that cares about human rights took one look at the World Cup in Qatar and thought that this should never happen, much like anyone that cares about environmental rights is looking at the United Arab Emirates being given COP next year and wondering why there's this gross hypocrisy in the world.
Yeah. You know, when we look at this, you imagine that a lot of this hate is propelled by fear for communities that have been lost in many instances. How do we navigate our way through? How do we bring people together rather than forcing them apart even further?
I think those of us who are part of the progressive but often silent majority need to stand up for human rights. We saw it at the end of the Cold War, big waves of populations who are standing up for human rights of women around the world, for human rights of LGBT minorities, for the rights of indigenous populations and more. But what's happened is that there have been so many gains in terms of progressiveness on human rights. People fell silent. And the minority who hate fundamental human rights, who hate difference, have suddenly become louder than the majority of us. There needs to be greater awareness and education. There needs to be much more support for our civil society organisations. But really we, particularly those of us in functioning democracies, need to be foregrounding human rights when we are going to the ballot boxes, as we saw that happened at the midterm elections in America, where people expected there would be this big red wave of Republicans, but actually the voters said, no, we don't want to legitimise these rollbacks on women's rights and on LGBT rights.
Yeah, which was such a positive sign. We'll see how it filters down. Good to talk to you again, Rosa. Thanks so much.
Thank you.